As the late afternoon sun dipped below the horizon, its fading light cast eerie shadows across the old highway. Mark and Elsie, siblings in their mid-20s, were on a long drive across the country to their parents' new home. They had been on the road for hours, with nothing but the endless rows of cornfields flanking either side of the road. The radio had long since lost signal, leaving only static as its soft, crackling undertone filled the car. The monotony was broken suddenly when Elsie pointed to a rickety sign that swayed slightly as a gentle breeze brushed through. It read, "Scenic Route and Maze, next right." Beneath it, someone had scratched in jagged letters, "Enter if you dare." "Let's check it out," Elsie said, a glint of adventure in her eyes. "It's been nothing but road and corn for hours. A little detour could be fun." Mark was less enthused, but didn't want to deny Elsie her fun. He turned the steering wheel gently, guiding the car down a narrow gravel path that seemed less traveled. The tires crunched over the stones, and the path led them directly to a vast field of tall, swaying grass, rather than the corn they had become accustomed to. "This doesn't look much like a maze," Mark observed, eyeing the wild, overgrown grass that stretched endlessly into the horizon. "It's even better!" Elsie exclaimed, stepping out of the car. The grass rustled in the wind, the sound almost like whispers. "Come on, let's explore a bit." Despite his reservations, Mark followed, the door of the car closing with a soft thud behind them. They ventured into the grass, which grew taller than either of them, the green blades tickling their arms and whispering secrets. As they walked further, the sky darkened, and the path behind them seemed to disappear. Every direction looked the same, an ocean of green that undulated with the wind. The playful adventure turned uneasy. The whispers grew louder, as if the grass itself was speaking. "Maybe we should head back," Mark suggested, his voice tinged with a growing anxiety. But when they turned around, the car was no longer in sight. Panic fluttered in Elsie's chest. "It's okay," she tried to convince herself as much as Mark. "We just walk straight. We'll find the car if we walk straight back." They retraced their steps, but the car remained elusive. The whispers intensified, no longer just the wind, but now clear voices calling out to them from within the grass. "Stay," they seemed to say, a chorus of eerie invitations. "Did you hear that?" Elsie asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mark nodded, his eyes wide. The sun had fully set, and the darkness was almost complete, save for the sliver of moon that cast a pale light over the field. They could barely see, but the voices were unmistakable now. "It's just the wind," Mark tried to convince himself and his sister, but his voice betrayed his fear. As they continued their futile search for a way out, the ground beneath them seemed to shift and sway, disorienting them further. Suddenly, Elsie tripped and fell, her hand landing on something not grass, something solid, cold, and metallic. With a trembling hand, she brushed aside the grass to reveal an old rusted sign half buried in the earth. It read, "Beware the lost souls." Chills ran down her spine as she read it aloud. They were not alone in this field. As they realized the truth of their situation, a cold wind picked up, the voices becoming screams, and the siblings ran blindly, the grass seeming to reach out and tangle their legs as if to keep them there forever. The adventure had turned into a nightmare, with the field intent on never letting them leave. Panic surged through Mark and Elsie as they stumbled through the relentless grip of the grass, the whispers turning into harsh echoes that seemed to bounce off an invisible barrier surrounding them. The once gentle field had turned hostile, with every rustle feeling like a threat. They had been running for what felt like hours, yet the darkness only seemed to grow denser, more suffocating. "Over here!" Mark shouted, grabbing Elsie's arm as he noticed a faint light glimmering through the grass. It was weak, but it was the only indication of direction they had seen since the sun had set. Pulling each other through the blades that clawed at their clothes and skin, they headed towards the light. As they drew closer, the light revealed itself to be an old lantern hanging from a wooden post that stood alone amidst the sea of grass. Beneath the lantern was a weathered book, its pages flapping wildly in the wind as if beckoning to be read. Elsie, driven by a mix of curiosity and desperation, picked up the book and held it close to the lantern's glow. The book was an old journal, the writings barely legible. "Beware the cries of the grass," it read. "They speak the sorrows of those trapped within, bound forever to the soil where they fell." Mark glanced over her shoulder, his face pale in the lantern light. "What does it mean?" he asked, his voice trembling. "It's a warning," Elsie replied, flipping through the pages, hoping for some clue on how to escape. "Maybe there's a way out. Something about how to break free from this curse." As they read on, the voices grew louder, no longer whispers but desperate, sorrowful wails. The journal told of a man who had come to the field years ago, drawn by legends of a hidden treasure buried deep within. Instead of riches, he found a nightmare. He wrote of seeing shadows moving through the grass, of hearing the cries of the past victims calling out to him. The last entry was frantic, scribbled in a shaky hand. "I should have listened to the warnings. I thought it was just local superstition. The grass, it feeds on the lost. If you hear their calls, it's already too late." Mark and Elsie exchanged a look of horror. "We need to get out of here," Mark said, his voice firm despite his fear. "Let's follow the light. Maybe it leads to an exit." Leaving the lantern and the journal behind, they continued through the grass, following the dim glow of other distant lights that began to appear sporadically. The voices seemed to follow them, echoing their own fears back at them. Suddenly, the ground beneath them gave way slightly, as if stepping on a loose patch of soil. Mark cried out as he fell to his knees, his hands sinking into the ground. Elsie helped him up, but as they looked down they saw that the earth was not just soil but a mixture of dirt and old tattered clothes, a grave, unmarked and forgotten. They realized then that they were not walking through a mere field but a graveyard of those who had come before them, ensnared by the same whispers that now sought to claim them. The field did not just trap, it devoured, feeding on the spirits of the lost. With renewed urgency, they pushed forward, the cries of the past pushing them onward, a morbid encouragement to escape the fate that had claimed so many. The distant lights seemed to flicker, as if signaling them to hurry, to escape the darkness and the echoes that sought to keep them forever in the grasp of the tall grass. Elsie and Mark continued their desperate escape, the dim lights flickering like distant stars lost in the night. The once soft whispers of the grass had escalated into an agonizing cacophony of screams and pleas from the spirits entwined within its clutches. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the grass itself was growing tired of their resistance and sought to pull them down into its depths. The moon, a thin crescent barely illuminating their path, seemed to mock their plight from above. As they stumbled forward, the reality of their situation settled in with each passing moment. They were not merely lost, they were caught in a relentless living maze that responded to their every move with a countermeasure of its own. Suddenly the ground trembled underfoot. The earth itself seemed to pulse with a life force, a heartbeat that resonated through the soles of their shoes. Mark halted, grabbing Elsie's arm. "Do you feel that?" he asked, his eyes wide with fear. Before Elsie could respond, a deep rumbling filled the air, and from the trembling ground, a new horror emerged. The grass parted, and from its depths rose the apparition of a man, his features twisted in eternal agony. His eyes, hollow and void of life, locked onto theirs as he floated just inches above the ground. "Leave, while you can," the specter moaned, his voice a mere echo of a life long past. The siblings backed away, but the ghostly figure advanced, his form becoming more defined, more desperate. "Who are you?" Elsie managed to stammer, her voice nearly lost in the rustling of the grass. "I was once like you, seeking adventure, ignoring the warnings," the ghost replied, his voice gaining strength. "But this field, it is cursed. It feeds on those who trespass, binding their souls to its roots forever." "How do we escape?" Mark asked, desperation seeping into his voice. The spirit paused, as if remembering a painful truth. "The heart of the field," he said slowly. "It binds us here.
Destroy it, and you may find freedom." "Where is this heart?" Elsie pressed, sensing a glimmer of hope. "Follow the crescent moon." The ghost pointed with a translucent hand. "Its light will guide you, but beware. The guardian of the heart will not let it go easily." With no further words, the apparition faded back into the grass, leaving behind a chilling cold that permeated the air. Mark and Elsie exchanged a determined look, knowing this might be their only chance. Guided by the crescent moon's faint light, they moved forward. The grass seemed to sense their purpose, its movements becoming more frantic, the whispers turning into howls that filled the night with terror. Yet the siblings pressed on, driven by the need to escape the endless night. After what seemed like hours, they arrived at a clearing where the grass was unnaturally still. In the center stood an ancient stone, moss-covered and cracked, pulsating with a faint, eerie light. The air around it was thick, charged with an energy that seemed both inviting and forbidding. "This must be it," Mark whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and resolve. As they approached the stone, the ground shook once more, and a massive figure emerged from the grass. Its form was monstrous, a beast woven from the grass itself, its eyes glowing with the same eerie light as the stone. The guardian, the beast roared, a sound that shook the very air around them, and charged. Mark and Elsie dodged, barely escaping its powerful limbs. They knew they had to destroy the stone, but the guardian blocked their path, relentless in its duty. Elsie, thinking quickly, grabbed a rock and hurled it at the stone. The rock struck the ancient monument, causing a crack to form. The guardian roared in rage, its movements becoming more erratic. "Keep going!" Mark yelled, picking up another rock. Together, they struck at the stone, each hit causing the guardian to falter, its form beginning to unravel. As the stone cracked further, a blinding light burst forth, enveloping everything. The guardian's cries faded into the night as the light grew, consuming the field, the whispers, and the darkness. Then, suddenly, everything went silent. Mark and Elsie found themselves standing on the road next to their car, the night calm and the field of grass nowhere in sight. Exhausted but relieved, they looked at each other, their bond strengthened by the ordeal they had survived. Without a word, they got into the car and drove away, the field and its horrors left behind, a nightmarish memory of their encounter with the grass that whispers. As they drove, the first rays of dawn crept across the horizon, promising a new day, and with it, the first rays of dawn painted the sky in shades of orange and pink as Mark and Elsie drove away from the nightmarish field. The silence between them was thick, each lost in their own thoughts, processing the horrors they had escaped. The early morning light brought with it a sense of relief, but the shadows of the past night lingered, haunting their relief with memories too vivid to be quickly dismissed. As they drove, the landscape around them gradually shifted from the rural emptiness to the more familiar bustle of small-town life. The road led them through a sleepy town, its streets empty except for the early risers starting their day. Mark pulled the car into a small diner's parking lot, the neon sign promising hot coffee and breakfast. The mundane normalcy of the scene was jarring after the supernatural terror they had endured. "Let's grab something to eat," Mark suggested, his voice still carrying a tremor. "We need to talk about what happened." Inside the diner, they chose a booth by the window, the morning sun streaming in, casting long shadows on the checkered floor. They ordered coffee, and as they waited for their food, they finally began to unravel the silence. Elsie stirred her coffee absent-mindedly. "Do you think it was real? Or did we imagine all of it?" she asked, looking up at Mark. "It was real," Mark replied firmly. "The grass, the voices, that thing guarding the stone. We both saw it, felt it. But why us?" Elsie pondered, her brow furrowed. "Why did we get drawn into it?" Mark took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the diner as if ensuring their conversation remained private. "I think that place, whatever it is, feeds off people who are curious, who ignore the warnings. It's like that journal said, the field traps those who trespass." Their food arrived, a welcome interruption, and they ate in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts.
As they resumed their conversation, Elsie's expression grew determined. "We should warn others," she declared. "We can't let anyone else go through what we did." Mark nodded in agreement. "We'll document everything. Maybe talk to the local authorities, although I doubt they'll believe us. But we have to try." The remainder of their meal passed with plans of what to do next, how to prevent further victims. They talked about going to the local library to see if there were any similar incidents, any lore about the field, or even records of missing persons who might have stumbled upon it. After settling the bill, they left the diner and headed to the town's library. The librarian, an elderly woman with spectacles perched on her nose, was initially skeptical, but grew concerned as they recounted their tale. "There have been stories," she admitted after a long pause, pulling out old newspaper clippings from a file. "Disappearances, strange sightings near the outskirts where you described. But people tend to avoid it. Superstition, perhaps, or maybe instinct." The clippings were chilling in their implications. People had indeed gone missing, and the descriptions of their last known whereabouts matched the location of the field. Armed with this new information, Mark and Elsie decided to go to the local police station. The reception at the police station was as expected, polite but incredulous. However, the presence of documented cases prompted a more serious discussion with the sheriff. They left feeling unsure if anything would change, but satisfied that they had done what they could to sound the alarm. As they walked back to their car, the weight of their experience still hung over them. But there was a new lightness too, a sense of closure, or perhaps just the relief of sharing their burden. The drive home was quiet, reflective. The landscape rolled by, a passive witness to the turmoil within the car's occupants. As they neared their parents' house, the familiar sights brought comfort, a reminder of normalcy, of safety. Upon arriving, they were greeted with warm hugs and the comforting smells of home. But as they settled in, the echo of the grass's whispers lingered faintly, a reminder that some doors once opened are not easily closed. The comfort of home did little to stave off the shadows that lingered in Mark and Elsie's minds. As they tried to reintegrate into the routine of everyday life, the echoes of the grass's whispers seemed to follow them, a silent soundtrack to their daily activities. Sleep became elusive, each night a struggle as they fought against the vivid memories that the darkness brought forth. One evening, while Elsie was in the backyard, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying a sound so eerily reminiscent of the whispering grass that she froze. It was just the wind, she reassured herself, but the fear had already taken root. The world seemed different now, more threatening, as if a thin veil had been lifted, revealing a darker undercurrent to her existence. Mark experienced his own hauntings. While at work, a sudden movement in the periphery of his vision would make him jump, his heart racing as he half expected to see the grassy guardian looming over him. Coffee breaks became moments of quiet dread, spent staring out the window at the swaying trees, wondering if the field was somehow reaching out to him. Their shared trauma became a silent divider between them and their family. Questions about their well-being were met with half smiles and assurances that everything was fine, even as their eyes told a story of sleepless nights and haunted thoughts. Their parents, concerned and confused, eventually chalked it up to stress from the road trip and the move. Determined to reclaim some semblance of normalcy, Elsie suggested they visit a therapist. "Maybe talking to someone professional can help us process this," she proposed one morning at breakfast, her eyes hopeful yet clouded with fatigue. Mark agreed, and they found themselves in the soft, calm office of Dr. Lena Morton, a therapist who specialized in trauma. As they took turns recounting their experience, Dr. Morton listened intently, her notes a quiet scratch in the background of their story. "It's not uncommon to experience continued stress and fear after an event like yours," Dr. Morton explained gently. "What you're describing sounds like PTSD. The field may not be physically reaching out to you now, but psychologically, its impact is very real." She suggested a treatment plan that included regular sessions, cognitive behavioral therapy to reshape their responses to their fears, and possibly medication to help with sleep and anxiety. Healing from trauma is a journey, she reassured them. It takes time, but you're not alone. Armed with this new understanding and support, Mark and Elsie began to feel a shift. Therapy sessions provided them tools to manage their fears, and slowly, the shadows began to recede. The whispers in the wind became just that, wind. The movements in their peripheral vision ceased to be harbingers of a supernatural threat and were recognized for what they truly were, just the usual everyday bustle. As they continued their therapy, they started a small blog, sharing their story anonymously. It wasn't long before others reached out with their own experiences of strange, unexplainable events. The blog became a place of support and understanding, a community where people could share without fear of disbelief or ridicule. One evening, as they sat together updating their blog, Elsie looked over at Mark. "Do you think we'll ever be completely free of it?" she asked softly. Mark paused, considering. "Maybe not entirely. Maybe we'll always have a bit of that fear. A little of that awareness that there's more out there than we can see or understand. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it makes us wiser, or at least more cautious." Elsie nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. "And maybe," she added, "it makes us more connected. To each other, to strangers on the internet, to the world." They ended their night with a quiet resolve, the screen of their blog casting a soft light in the dark room. The whispers of the grass were now just a distant memory, but the lessons they learned from it echoed in their lives, a reminder of their strength, their resilience, and their connection to the unseen world. As the weeks turned into months, Mark and Elsie found strength in their growing ability to face the world without the overshadowing fear of their ordeal. The therapy sessions became less about managing immediate trauma and more about understanding and growing from their experiences. The blog, too, flourished into a robust community, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the shared nature of inexplicable encounters. One crisp autumn morning, as they walked through a park watching the leaves fall in a dance of red and gold, Elsie reflected on how much they had changed. "Do you remember the night when we first escaped? How everything seemed so dark and hopeless?" she asked, her voice tinged with a reflective sadness, yet underscored by a newfound strength. Mark nodded, watching a leaf spiral to the ground. "I do. It feels like a lifetime ago, though. We've come so far since then." "It's strange," Elsie continued, "how something so terrifying could lead to something so positive. This community we've built, the people we've helped, they all came from that darkness." Mark smiled, a genuine, warm expression that reached his eyes. "It's like that old saying, 'From the ashes a fire shall be woken.' We took our nightmare and turned it into something that keeps others from feeling alone in their fears." Their conversation drifted to the future, to the potential of their blog evolving into a more extensive support network, perhaps even a non-profit organization dedicated to helping those affected by supernatural traumas, giving them a voice and sanctuary. Later that day, they met with a consultant to discuss the possibility of expanding their project. Sitting in a cozy office surrounded by books and the comforting aroma of coffee, they laid out their vision. "We want to build something lasting, something that can make a real difference," Elsie explained passionately. The consultant, intrigued by their unique focus, offered practical advice on funding, outreach, and legal considerations. "There's a real gap in support for experiences that fall outside typical explanations. You're tapping into something deeply needed," she affirmed. Energized by the meeting, Mark and Elsie spent the next weeks formalizing their plans. They registered their organization, designed a more robust website, and started outreach for stories and experiences from all over the globe. Their nights were long, but the work was fulfilling, filled with a sense of purpose and community. One evening, as they prepared a presentation for an upcoming paranormal conference, Mark paused, looking at Elsie with a serious yet heartened expression. "Do you ever think about going back to the field?" he asked, the question hanging in the air like a delicate mist. Elsie considered it, her mind replaying the terror but also the triumph. "Sometimes, yes. Not to relive it, but maybe to understand it better, to face it as someone new, not victims but survivors."
Maybe one day, Mark agreed. When we're ready, it might even help others to see that you can return to the place of your deepest fears and not be overcome by them. Their discussion was thoughtful, a testament to how far they had come from the scared, frantic survivors who had fled the field. They were no longer defined by their experience, but had grown beyond it, weaving their past into a narrative of empowerment and support. As the year drew to a close, they hosted their first conference, bringing together experts, therapists, and survivors of paranormal experiences. The event was a heartfelt gathering, a space where stories were shared, tears were shed, and laughter echoed through the halls. Mark and Elsie stood together at the end of the conference, watching people leave with smiles and words of gratitude. "We did it," Mark said, wrapping an arm around Elsie's shoulders. "We did," she agreed, her eyes bright with tears of joy. "And we'll keep doing it for as long as we can." Their journey had begun in a field of whispering grass, a place of fear and entrapment, but it had led them here, to a place of healing and community, a testament to their resilience and the enduring human spirit. The whispers of the grass were now just echoes, a distant part of their past that had seeded a future filled with hope and connection.